This is an important one. Sajid has ordered an urgent review of gender treatment for under 18s, reportedly comparing political fears over the transition to silence during the Rotherham grooming scandal. The Health Secretary says vulnerable children are worryingly being given gender hormone treatment on the NHS, with a senior government source telling The Times Javed believes there is the same theme of not being afraid to tackle issues that others might prefer not to talk about. Referrals for child hormone treatment at the Tavistock and Portman Trust have increased 50-fold in the last decade, and the Health Secretary is understood to have been alarmed at the interim findings of a review into NHS gender identity services for children. It found staff felt pressured to adopt an unquestioning affirmative approach to the issue of transitioning, and gender issues caused other mental health issues to be overshadowed. Javed is understood to be preparing legal changes that would give the report author access to an NHS database of children treated by the service to see how many later regretted taking puberty blockers and less reversible cross-sex hormones. So as the Health Secretary tackles this toxic issue of gender identity, was he right to compare political sensitivities over gender dysphoria to the fears of racism in Rotherham over grooming gangs, Bev Turner?
I think it's an interesting comparison to make, and it took me a little while to work out what he was getting at. And what's happened is Hilary Cass, she's the former president of the Royal College of Paediatrics and Child Health. She's been leading this review for Sajid Javid. Is this review necessary? Absolutely. It feels like this particular issue has gained such speed and such momentum. As you say, the numbers now of children who are going for gender reassignment surgery are so huge and have gone up so much in the last decade. And yet I feel like I don't understand it. And what I want to do, I want to hear from the parents of a child who has transitioned young. I want to hear what their journey is genuinely like. I want to hear from somebody who has had their gender transitioned and then regretted it. I want to hear from somebody who hasn't regretted it, who transitioned young. Because we all have strong opinions. We know our instinct is that this is wrong on many levels, that children should not be given adult decision-making powers too young in many areas, particularly irreversible surgery. But I don't really feel like we're hearing from the people who are at the coalface. So I think this report is a brilliant idea so that we can get to understand the position of these families, because there's no doubt this must be awful. But do you know what? Teenagers and young children are very suggestive. And there are times with the child, if they're trying to get their parents' attention, if they are trying to be the coolest kid in class, because let me tell you, as a mum of three, this is a topic they talk about a lot. And all of my children have somebody in their year who is non-binary. This is all, you know, this is normal for them now. Yeah. It's the new thing. And children
I think a lot of these people, let's be frank, are confused about their sexuality. Because when the hormones are running and, you know, I've been through this. I know what it's like, and that's why I'm so concerned about this. But Benjamin Butterworth, you don't think it's the wrong thing, do you?
I mean, I think the idea of comparing it to the profound and long-running, unpleasant and ugly situation in Rotherham, that's designed purely to be inflammatory, and I don't see that helps any young person. Look, first of all, no under 18 gets gender reassignment surgery. That's not legal until 18, and the puberty blockers are reversible because they delay the process, and so someone could still come off them and have the puberty they would have. Look, the truth is that there are a very small number of cases where someone has regretted it or felt that the system wasn't good enough.
That's not true.
And so in those cases...
True.
Well, I'm talking, Carole.
It's not a small number of cases.
Well,
I don't care if you're talking.
Speak in a minute. It is a small number.
You've just said something like it is not a small number.
It is a very small number because there are thousands of people on the waiting list. And so I'd say two quick things. One is that if there are mistakes happening, well, the answer, which strangely none of these people suggest, is that there should be better funded. There should be more doctors and counsellors in the process to stop the kind of mistake that Bev suggested could happen. And, you know, the other thing is
that... not worried
if you talk about people who regretted their decision, what about all the people who don't get that far, who needed it? They need to talk
these
about.
medical professionals feel scared. They feel pushed into an orthodoxy, like this woke orthodoxy that's taking over all of our institutions.
A psychiatrist called David Bell, who worked with the Tavistock and Portman Trust, which is the one that's been criticised, it's the NHS Gender Reassignment Clinic. He did this massive report, he worked there, and this report was shocking. You know, he came out and was saying that kids as young as 3 and 4 were being taken there, and kids of under 18 were getting treatment. He just said the staff were terrified to speak out. The guy who was running the Tavistock, a guy called Marcus Evans. He had to resign amid all the claims that kids were being pushed into the surgery by doctors. You could have...
You don't get surgery, that's not true.
OK, you start on the puberty blocks. So we're being pushed into treatment by doctors. Some of
Which
them
does
after,
eventually lead to surgery.
Some of them
But
after,
no under 18 can have
some of them
surgery.
after just one assessment. And you know what's happening? And a girl called Charlie Evans, who was born a girl and lived 10 years as a man, she's now started up a group now for detransitioners. In America, the detransitioner groups, it's the big thing. Transition regret, they're calling it, is a big thing in the States now. And it's going to become a big thing here in the same way that the percentages are increasing for people going to talk about, at these clinics. It's the same thing about people who regret it. So it isn't small numbers. Charlie Evans said the first time she talked about it publicly, she said in her hometown, Newcastle, she literally had hundreds of people contacting her saying they regretted, because a lot of these kids who pitch up at this clinic or these clinics, they've got other issues. They've got eating disorders. They're suffering from bereavement issues.
Mental health issues.
But that's why the process should be much better funded. There are huge backlogs and huge pressure on the people that have to make these decisions.
Funding, it's more psychology before you start throwing drugs at kids.
But that's why there should be a much better system. There should be more clinics, more counsellors, more doctors to make these assessments. Surely you agree with that?
More transition.
But how can you argue that if there are mistakes happening, that the answer there is to have a better process?
Final word,
Not necessarily, because the Tavistock Clinic do the counselling. They do the therapy with the children. They have a huge backlog. And if anybody from the clinic was here, they would say, give us more money, we can get through people more quickly. But I think Sajid Javid's point about the fact that there is perhaps a fear because everybody isn't automatically... They don't feel able to step away from what feels like a bit of a bandwagon, right?
Oh, give it a
and the
rest.
trans
lobby has... Give what a rest, Benjamin.
The anti-trans lobby. Give this rest, the idea that transgender people are somehow controlling the media.
Transgender...
Nonsense. When did you last hear from a transgender person talking about this?
I was telling this exact story, though. When I was covering for Michelle last week, I was telling a story that I was due to speak on International Women's Day at a legal firm, and I was cancelled by a trans activist who worked at the firm because they didn't like a tweet that I had liked, which was a link to a national newspaper. Now, I never had a conversation with that person. I wish I could have done, and maybe I should go back and revisit it, because this is what I'm saying. We all feel strongly about it. Cancel culture is happening because of trans activists.
Name these powerful transgender people. Name them.
That's just a stupid thing
It's
to
not
say.
a stupid thing,
really
because
is.
if you claim that transgender people have all this power...
your gotcha questions, mate.
It's not a gotcha.
Get your own show and you can do your crap gotcha questions.
It's not a gotcha.
We don't do them on this panel.
Do you know what's
It's not a
terrible
gotcha, it's a fact.
From the trans lobby, the kids who are now detransitioning, they're being victimised and shunned by the trans lobby, and they're being called traitors because of...
Well, you've got no evidence. I'm waiting for the evidence.
A spokesman for Tavistock and Portman NHS Foundation Trust said being respectful of someone's identity does not preclude exploration. We agree that support should be holistic, based on the best available evidence, and that no assumption should be made about the right outcome for any given young person.